I live down the street from a church, and the bells are ringing, telling me it's 7 o'clock. It's kind of cool. Don't need a watch when that bell is going. Anyway, hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar called The Food Mood Connection. We are hoping that you'll be able to understand the bi-directional relationship between the gut and the brain. I'm Cindy Collin. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and supervisor, as well as a certified mental health integrative medicine provider, and I'm also the owner of Flourish. And I'm joined today by the lovely Angela Nash.
Hey everyone. I'm lucky enough to be the functional nutritionist at Flourish, psychotherapy and nutrition. Cindy's vision was to merge those two, and we just really love making the food mood connection. It's the big, we're going to make a case for that today on how important the gut brain connection is for affecting our mood. So it's one of our favorite topics.
It
So hello.
is. Yes, we talk about it all the time, even personally when we're together. We're always talking about food and what's going on with our health. And I know that when I had my own journey, I think most integrative medicine folks like myself have their own journey with functional or integrative medicine to help them heal. And when I did a dietary change so many years ago to help with an autoimmune and inflammatory condition I've been struggling with, I noticed that my overall level of anxiety that has been with me since I was about 5 years old almost disappeared. And I was like, what? This is pretty cool. And just got a little obsessed with learning more and getting trainings and decided, oh God, this is way too good to not incorporate into my private practice. So here we are bringing the both of these two things together. And it's really, really nice that over the years that more folks are being open to learning about the gut brain connection. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our presentation here. And instead of starting from the bottom, let's start from the very beginning. All right, welcome. Again, the basics of the food mood. Bi-directional relationship between body and brain is the key point that we're going to talk about today. But before we get going, what I'd like to do is let's start with some mindfulness. Let's do some breath together. So if you can at this moment, just take a moment and connect with your breath and with your body and arrive right here, right now with a nice relaxed breath, maybe being really present with how you're seated in your chair and bringing your full presence to what we're talking about here. And that might mean if you could maybe turn in a device or an app off to set an intention to be fully present. All right. Now let's talk about the objectives today. We have a bunch of things. This is a super complicated subject. We're going to do our best to get into some really key areas and kind of simplify it. I don't believe we're going to have time to take questions today, but you may be able to put some questions in the chat, and in between, maybe we can look at it to see if we can answer them. But a lot to cover. The first things first is the microbiome. What is it? What's its role in relationship to mood, as well as the enteric nervous system, which is also known as the second brain. And then we're going to talk about how the vagus nerve is connecting the autonomic nervous system and how these two nervous systems play a role in our mood and even our brain function. Angela's going to do a really good deep dive, a little bit deep on leaky gut and how inflammation can negatively impact our mood and even cause disease. And then, of course, gluten and sugar. We're going to talk about these two inflammatory foods today and go through some of the science on why it's inflammatory, what's happening maybe under the hood that you're not aware of. It may kind of change the way you look at a cookie from here on out, but it's good stuff to know anyway. But the big question here, why do you even want to learn about the gut brain connection? Well, what I was saying before, that I noticed even with my own work that all of a sudden, anxiety almost disappeared. But what we've learned in working with clients, and what there's now really good research supporting, that when we are working on improving gut health and digestive health, we can reduce mental health symptoms. And the cool thing about this is you have to eat. So if you learn how to make some different choices and even follow your own mindful awareness about what's happening in your body when you're eating, after you're eating, it's kind of a free way to get to understand what's happening in your body with food. And when I say free, I mean it is completely free because you're collecting data about what feels good and doesn't feel good to you, rather than even spending money on some tests. Now, mind you, we love functional medicine protocols. So at Flourish, we do a lot of testing, but this type of thing is something that we actually ask everyone to do to kind of get a more awareness about what's happening within you when you're eating. And of course, there's really not bad side effects if we're being more mindful about what we eat, if we're recognizing how our mood is shifting or our energy levels. So we're not having maybe harmful side effects from like anti-anxiety medications, but we are having positive side effects like having more energy or having less pain and increased strength, and our moods are more balanced, and maybe we're sleeping better. So there's all kinds of upside to learning more about the gut-brain connection when it comes to your unique individual body. But of course, what I like to say is that in a perfect world where we have a thriving microbiome, we wouldn't even need to have a webinar like this, because we would have all of this great diversity in our gut to begin with, because we're having diverse foods, we're having lots of fiber, we have a lot of stress-free moments, we're breathing really clean air and drinking really good water, and we're not maybe exposed to any toxins or chemicals. So in that perfect world, we maybe wouldn't need this webinar, but our world is not like that anymore. And so in this way, we need to learn more about how to take some more effort to kind of feed our microbiome and give it what is really needs. And I think that what I like to do is think about, gosh, back in the day. I mean, my 31-year-old son says back in the day, but he's really like referring to like the 60s or the 70s. But even not that long ago in the 60s, the soil was rich with nutrients before there was lots of agriculture depleting it of nutrients, and before there were pesticides and Roundup. Back in the day, produce and meats were not genetically modified, so they could be heavier, and they could get whoever was producing it more money, because you're getting paid by the pound, not by the nutrients that are in there. High fructose corn syrup came into play in the 1970s. And so, your box of Cheerios in the 60s had more sugar in it, and it was more synthetic sugar, 10, 20 years later. Of course, cooking oils. My grandmother cooked with butter and lard. My mother in the 70s was cooking with margarine, because we had this false sense that fat was bad for you, but now we know fat is good for you. So we're going back to cooking with oils and butter, even lard, versus something like canola oil. And you may not even know that canola oil was not great for your microbiome, but Angela's going to talk to you about that, how it can create an injury in your microbiome. And then also back in the day, and again, this is not even that long ago, is that food was being cooked and heated up in cast iron, glass, and ceramic and stainless, in an oven on a stovetop. And then you fast forward, and so much food is being cooked and heated in plastic containers in a microwave. And we do know that plastics, that high heat can take plastic and put it into the food. And so we have some plastic toxin byproducts, that have entered our microbiome from this way of eating food. So again, we're not in a perfect world. And in our modern world, we have a lot more stress. So we have a lot more opportunities to work on having a healthier microbiome. And Angela is going to now talk to you about what is the microbiome.
It's always fun to start with our defining terms just a little bit. It's a term that really gets thrown around, but I would like to just touch base on exactly what it is. It is 2 to 4 pounds of beneficial gut bacteria that hopefully lives in the large intestine. That's where it's supposed to live. It holds space against the intestinal walls to prevent pathogenic bacteria from taking hold. So, the more varied the species of beneficial bacteria, the less disease that we have. And it also does some amazing things, such as making our neurotransmitters for us. 95% of the serotonin is made in the gut. So, clearly, a place that we want to protect. It also breaks down and distributes nutrients such as vitamins and amino acids. Um, and then amazingly, it makes a lot of our B vitamins for us, as well as vital short chain fatty acids that our body uses for energy for other organs. So I'm not going to go into that level of detail, but you've probably heard of butyrate as an example. That is a short chain fatty acid that is used to give energy to the colon itself. So really an amazing place that we want to protect. So we do have some modern challenges to a healthy microbiome, like Cindy was talking about. Some things right today that make life harder on microbiome than even a few years ago. We seem to have increased stress and trauma. We have more inflammatory foods and toxins in our everyday environment, toxins that we're not even aware of. We have substance abuse, which is a chemical and stress response. Overprescription of antibiotics is harmful to the beneficial bacteria that live in us, as well as the harmful bacteria that they were designed to eradicate. Little or no time in nature. There have actually been studies that look at the microbiome of people who spend time in nature, taking care of their souls outside, and people who don't. And there's really a difference in diversity. So, some other challenges are that microbiome research and testing is still in the early stages. So, it's not as easy to just take a test, check out your microbiome, add some probiotics. Those sound like easy fixes, but it's not that easy because they're really complicated organisms. It's a complicated system deep within our body. So rather than relying on testing and probiotics, we find that it's still simpler just to do a better job of taking care of your microbiome and so that it can take care of you. And we're going to tell you some things that you can do at home without crazy testing and relying on supplements, though those can be helpful. Let's do the DIY stuff, the do-it-yourself stuff. Excessive consumption of sugar, gluten, alcohol, and dairy are ways that we injure our microbiome that we actually have control over. Eating animals that are laden with antibiotics and hormones is very dangerous for microbiome because the very antibiotics that big agriculture is using with our meat goes ahead and kills our good organisms off once it gets into our body and the digestion, especially in the colon, where those waste products and antibiotics end up doing the most damage. Too little fiber. We'll do a slide on this, but microbiome actually needs fiber to live. That is their food. Grain and seed oils that are overly high in omega-6 versus omega-3 are really harmful, and particularly because industrial food oils are manufactured with solvents that are very harsh and bad for our gut. So examples of industrial food oil that you will find in restaurants generally are corn oil, sunflower oil, soy, and canola. So we'll make a case later that it's really best if you can try to eat most of your meals at home where you can actually control the type of oil that you're eating. Other insults are, again, overuse of antibiotics both in food and in our medicine because they kill the beneficial bacteria. Overuse of NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, pain relievers, they actually reduce biodiversity and are very harmful for the gut. And when I learned that, that was just so disheartening because I know we've all, taken those pain relievers for a long time, and just have to be easy with yourself and say, hey, that's new information for me. I'll do the best I can now. And I've been free of those for 5 years, so it can be done, but it takes a little work. Toxic chemicals such as those in Roundup and even in our beauty products. I read a statistic this week that when a woman finishes her hair and skin routine, she has put 168 chemicals on her body. It's just shocking. Look at the back of your youth serums and collagen protective skincare, and just take a second thought. And then chronic stress management, which Cindy's going to tell us more about, affect the chronic stress actually reduces our biodiversity, and we can have a die-off of our beneficial bacteria.
Yeah.
So today we're making the case for the food-mood connection, and that relies on the gut-brain connection. And all of it is because we have a second brain in our gut. It has a special name. It's called the enteric nervous system. Enteric means intestinal. But this second brain, in body's wisdom, it decided if food is going to come into gut and all the water and the liver's there to direct traffic, then doesn't it make sense to just make most of what we need as far as hormones, neurotransmitters, enzymes, proteins, all of that? Doesn't it make sense to make it in the gut? So that's exactly what second brain does. The enteric nervous system, or gut brain, makes most of our neurotransmitters, 95% of our serotonin. That just blows me away. Yeah. And so you can see that we're going to have bidirectional communication between the enteric brain and the central nervous brain. And that happens along the vagus nerve. It's kind of like a neural superhighway. But the interesting thing about that is, instead of it being 50-50% communication, 80% of that communication is going from body up to brain. And it's been proven that when we consume inflammatory foods, pour water, stress our gut out, don't move our bodies, all of that is going to send danger signal up to brain, causing brain inflammation. So it just makes the case that when we have body inflammation, we have brain inflammation.
Yeah. Inflammation, it's the cause of every disease that we have. Now, we're not saying here that if you have an inflamed gut that you're going to have brain cancer or something. But what we're talking about is really the signaling, and how when the signaling gets stuck in a process, and we're going to go over that in the autonomic nervous system, that can totally affect our mood and our brain functioning in that way. So we're here, the connector really between the enteric nervous system and the autonomic nervous system is it's our survival wiring. Both of these nervous systems are meant to detect dangers, so we can be warned of threats. So the enteric nervous system is really protecting against threats that have been ingested. There's layers, and we go into this more in a CEU workshop for mental health professionals about the threat system and the coordination between these two. But just if we look at the big picture, is that threats that are ingested, there's that system that says, oh, this is maybe not good for us, which is why sometimes there's vomiting or even diarrhea. It's your body's way. Let me get this out. Well, the autonomic nervous system, which some of you all have heard about, maybe you've heard of something called fight or flight. Maybe you've heard that a lot, especially during COVID, about being in fight or flight with what's happening. But that nervous system is meant to detect external threats, whether they're perceived or actual. And it's these danger detection systems, the gut and the brain together are working together in order to let you know that there is danger and you need to pay attention if we can give you the best chance for survival. So the vagus nerve is what's responsible for sending these messages. And a lot of times these messages that something isn't right are are happening in symptoms. And the biggest question that we have is, are you listening? Are we all listening? Sometimes these symptoms are like whispers. It's really even hard to tell that they're there. But we're going to go over a little bit stuff on the autonomic nervous system, because these are symptoms that are very easy, a little, not very easy, but they are easier to detect, so we can see, are we in a threat situation? Is our body feeling threatened, and what can we do about it? So the vagus nerve and its connection to the gut and brain, vagus is Latin for wandering. As you can see here on this picture here, it's a pretty long nerve, as you can see in yellow. And then we have some also connection to a facial nerve. So this information superhighway that's bi-directional between gut and the brain, it's sending messages between the two. And again, most of its job is to be protective. When it's getting messages that there's danger, real or perceived, it's going to switch. It's like a railroad track switching. Oh gosh, let's like switch over here. So if there's a threat, if audio or visual sense picks up a threat, even if it's an unconscious threat, you'll have this unconscious switching happening within your body into a survival system, so you can run really fast or fight really strongly or scream really loud. If there's a threat about gut bacteria, it's maybe going to activate your vagus nerve and keep you in fight or flight. So there's a very big connection between irritable bowel syndrome and anxiety, right? Because that imbalance of gut bacteria is kind of keeping you chronically engaged in fight or flight. Messages from the immune system, like, hey, should we fight the good fight with you, right? Or are being sent back and forth, as well as messages of trauma. So messages of that there's something really scary that's happening right now. Your survival ability may not be great because maybe you're alone, or maybe you don't have the capacity to deal with what's there. These are some of the messages that are coming up from vagus nerve, and it is impacting your digestion, which is then impacting your mood, right? So, and I'll get into that a little bit in the next slide, but understanding that vagus nerve is the main superhighway between and the vagal tone of the vagus nerve, which I kind of talk about, the brake is off or on, like, ooh, fight or flight. No, it's on, we're okay. It's about resiliency. That's what kind of is responsible for some of the mood stuff that we're going to go over. So the autonomic nervous system, as I talked about, that there's a fight or flight, which is also called sympathetic nervous system. The other side of that is parasympathetic nervous system, where everything's groovy and cool. It's also called rest and digest. But the polyvagal theory, which was authored by researched by Dr. Stephen Porges, identified there's a third branch of, it's like a freeze or a frozen mode. Also, he terms as dorsal vagal. But there's a therapist named Deb Dana who actually visualized the autonomic nervous system on a ladder. And I've done something similar to hers, but I'm putting it out here so we can understand how the vagus nerve is switching between these states and how it's affecting our mood. So when we think about the autonomic nervous system as a ladder, and we have rest and digest up here, this is where we're connected and joyful. We can laugh, we can make passionate love here, we're at ease. We have really great organized thoughts. We can be really creative in this state. So even though it says rest and digest, it's not only for sleeping or for hanging out on the couch or something. It is really where we thrive, being in ventral vagal. And the beauty of this survival wiring is we were really meant to go up and down this ladder throughout the day, and because little things can kind of set off again that oh, I hear a sound, is there somebody coming, and I'm not prepared, or I maybe smell something that's maybe a little dangerous, should I really check that out? Like, these little things can temporarily put us into sympathetic, and then once that we go through the maybe the perceived threat, and we notice, and we go back to breathing really well, we can go back up to ventral vagal. So it's this resiliency that we have to go in and out of these things pretty quickly. Um, but what happens in our modern world, we aren't so resilient as we used to be, as well as if we've had some trauma in our past, where we feel alone, we can kind of get stuck in the bottom here, in the middle and the bottom of the ladder. So in the middle, where we have sympathetic nervous system, this is where we're totally in survival mode. Our breath is shallow, our heart rate is increased. This is to help us to invigorate some really big muscles so we can run really quickly if we need to. Our thoughts are going to be very, very narrowly focused on protecting ourselves. So they might even be catastrophic in a way, like, oh God, I'm late for a meeting, I'm going to lose my job. We're going right from I'm late for a meeting to I lose my job, as a way to protect us from losing our livelihood, right? So in this way, that protective, if it's only for a few minutes, that's okay. But when we're chronically engaged in sympathetic because we have some bad bacteria in our gut, some pathogens that are interfering with the vagus nerve to switch back into ventral vagal. A lot of research is showing that that's really been happening. Also, what Dr. Porges found with the dorsal vagal and the the frozen response, that we can feel hopeless there, we can feel disconnected and withdrawn, and really exhausted. Sometimes I think of also dorsal vagal as being adrenal fatigue, that when we are in sympathetic for a really long time, adrenal glands are taking over and pumping out all kinds of hormones to give you more energy if you're tired. But if we're doing that all the time and we're not able to disengage, those adrenals are going to be exhausted and we are just going to collapse. And I know I have had adrenal fatigue and chronic fatigue. I used to be the Energizer bunny. So this feeling when we're in the bottom of the ladder of feeling just so heavy, like I can't even get out of my chair, or I can't get out of bed because it just feels so exhausting to get up, or just even to wash my hair. And so when I think about these states down here, we're sympathetic, this is where anxiety can hang out for sure. And depression hangs out here at the bottom of the ladder. So if we need vagal tone to be resilient, to pop in and out of the bottom of the ladder up to the top, and vagal tone isn't there, then we're not going to be able to disengage from sympathetic or dorsal vagal. And the reason why we may not be able to disengage can be coming from our microbiome. As I said, there could be some really naughty little pathogens in our intestinal tract that are going to keep the danger signal active for vagus nerve, saying, oh no, you're still not okay, there's still danger going on, even though the threat is internal, not external. Another thing that can keep us in the bottom of the ladder, or not able to have vagal tone, is trauma, not really developing, let's say, the strength of the vagus nerve to go in and out because it's kind of locked and loaded in either a frozen or a fight or flight response. And then what happens that when we're in the bottom or the middle of the ladder, I missed this little important thing. When we're in the middle of the ladder, is that our digestion and our sex drive is turned off. So we have more resources in our body, more energy. So again, we can run really fast or scream really loud, because digestion and having sex take up an awful lot of our energy. So if we are in sympathetic because of trauma or because of bad bacteria, bad signaling happening here, or we're in dorsal vagal, digestion is going to be turned off. And maybe you know what that feels like. Like you've had something kind of stressful happening and you just lose your appetite. And when you've lost your appetite for days and days, you'd know, well, I got to eat something, because I know I have to eat even though I'm not hungry. And then sometimes we feel, well, if I eat something, I'm going to feel better. And if we eat a meal that's really hard to digest, like, I don't know, we have some pasta with some cheese, or something heavy, might be hard to digest. Well, that well, then we don't have digestion turned on, which means that digestive enzymes that we release when you're in a parasympathetic, the digestive enzymes in our body break down the foods into pieces so that we can absorb the nutrients through our stomach. Dr. Ben Lynch likes to say the stomach does not have teeth. So, even if you've chewed your food really well, it's still going to be hard to break down if your digestion is turned off. So what can happen then with digestion turned off, the food is not really being properly broken down and eliminated and absorbed in the way that it needs to. We're going to create more bad bacteria, more pathogens that can then interfere with the vagus nerve. So we can then continue the cycle of, oh, we still have bad bugs in our gut that's telling vagus nerve, oh, there's still danger here. So we're still in either sympathetic or dorsal vagal. So you can see how the cycle goes and goes. And what Angela and I work with at Flourish is that when you're having that feeling of I'm not hungry, I don't feel good, like I'm just super fatigued, we try to look at maybe some juices or even some broths or some soups or smoothies so that we know that digestion is turned off, but we can still get nutrients in you. So that's I know that this may be a little complicated, untying the food and the mood, but knowing that where you are on the ladder can help you to figure out what to eat, can help you to know when you're in the middle of the ladder, taking deep belly breaths, looking at people in the eye can help you climb the ladder to get into parasympathetic. So these are really nice symptoms, nice messages that your body is letting you know where you are. And if you are listening to them, you can make some good changes or put some good breaths in that can then actually help your microbiome in the long run. So here we are. Let's go back to microbiome and let's talk about leaky gut, Angela.
Okay. So if we want to reduce inflammation to help that signaling between gut and brain, one way we can do it is to make the gut healthier, and leaky gut is when it is not healthy. So let's kind of define that. It's a term really thrown around, but what does it actually mean? Well, there is only one cell layer that divides the food in our gut to the bloodstream, one cell layer. And it is supposed to have really tight, close connections between those cells with no daylight showing through. But if we have stress or inflammation, it can cause gaps to form right here, like the gaps in my fingers and the gaps on the right side of this diagram. Do you see those red cells, how they're puffy and inflamed, and there's space between the cells? If you only have one epithelial layer dividing food from bloodstream, you can see that that's a really important group of cells to have really good integrity. And if you don't, if they're open, undigested food, bacteria, toxin, viewed as foreign invaders to the immune system, will leak through prematurely through those gaps and into the bloodstream. And then the immune system fires up because it says foreign invaders are here. It triggers that inflammatory response, which is a problematic chain of events to find and fight that foreign invader. So like Cindy said, that vagus nerve is the main communication method between the gut and the brain and giving you that alarm system. So we're going to go through just gluten and sugar today, and then a few things that affected microbiome to just give you some quick things to understand that cause inflammation. Gluten is another one of those terms that is thrown around and everybody's gluten-free, but I don't know if they actually know the mechanism. So I want to go through that a little bit. What is gluten? It is a lovely glue that makes our pasta and pizza crust stick together beautifully so that we can roll it out without it tearing. But gluten is actually a toxic lectin. Lectin is a defensive plant protein. If you think about plants from their point of view, they want to grow and thrive too. They want to plant seed in the soil and grow and increase their species. So they really don't want to be overeaten by animals. So they have this little defensive mechanism called a toxic lectin, which makes us not eat them as much or poop them out quickly so they can grow more plants. And the mechanism they do that is called a glycoprotein. It means when a carb is mixed with a protein, and it is found in grains such as wheat, barley, rye, spelt, and some other grains. But gut doesn't know what to do with the glycoprotein. Oddly enough, it's really unusual to gut. And so gut presents glycoprotein in gluten to the immune system and says, hey guys, you deal with it. So we'll do a little
Here
more on
you
that on
go.
the next slide.
Yeah.
But we like Tom O'Brien. He is a functional medicine doctor and another person focusing on gluten's negative impact on the body, and a particularly connection to autoimmune disease. And he likes to say the most common source of inflammation is what's on the end of your fork, and the most common food is wheat, triggering inflammation across the board for everyone. Now, not everyone always feels gripey tummy, pain and bloating or gas, but just know that the integrity of your gut is compromised when your epithelial cells are exposed to that gliadin glycoprotein. And research on gluten then, and also glyphosate, which is the chemical name for Roundup. So much of our industrial agriculture now is pre-impregnated with pesticides, particularly the glyphosate and Roundup. So if you're growing seeds that are already impregnated with that chemical, you can see that that is also really inflammatory to gut. So whether it's the gluten gliadin protein in the seed or it's the glyphosate in the seed, both of those are really inflammatory. And
Yeah,
then
and
leaky nose. Oh, go
I
ahead.
just want to add here, you're making a really good point. I mean, there's so much research that's coming out, and Dr. O'Brien has a whole bunch on his website. And because this thing about glyphosate, like it's like, oh, how did gluten all of a sudden become so awful for
Mm-hmm.
everybody? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, it's like what I said back in the day, there wasn't maybe so much glyphosate on the gluten. And actually, a lot of what's happening is maybe glyphosate is the really big problem with gluten more than the glycoprotein itself. Like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, research will show us, I think, as time goes on, what it is. So it's a little bit of a controversy right now, but it is something to understand, that some people say, oh God, I've been having gluten my whole life, why is all of a sudden it's a problem now? Well,
Right.
they're because maybe things are different now.
Yeah. And I have a client who was living in Europe recently, and he said he's so much worse when he comes back to the US. And it's because big pharma, uh, we have glyphosate in our grain, where in Europe, they're a lot more non GMO, and they don't put as many pesticides booked in with their seeds.
Yeah.
So that's just one thing. So I'm not going to belabor the point of gluten's mechanism of inflammation. Let's go down to that second paragraph of how it actually works. And we have a lovely protein called zonulin, which keeps our cells tight. You'll hear the term tight junction now that we mentioned it today. Keeps our junctions tight. But once it senses gliadin, it says, I can't deal with this. I'm going to relax my tight junction and let the gliadin and the gluten go on through and present to the immune system, where it is presented as a foreign invader. And the problem with that is it's really hard for zonulin to grow back or to get back together without eliminating the inflammatory foods, but also then you've got to heal the gut. You've got to get zonulin working again. So sometimes people can get off gluten thinking that's all they needed to do, but their gut was open, so other foods become inflammatory. So there's a little bit more work to do there. So we talked about gluten, and now we need to talk about sugar. We've all heard, that sugar is not the best food for us, but actually why? It's a pretty interesting mechanism, and it's also interesting in that it's gotten worse with modern agriculture. So sugar feeds our cancer cells and it acidifies the gut, and it can cause disorders, digestive disorders such as Crohn's, but also diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's. Well, why table sugar is called, it's two sugars together. It's called a complex, even though it's not really that complex, but it's made of glucose and fructose. And a 2009 study showed that if you shift your sugars 25% more towards fructose, so less glucose and more fructose, you had a fourfold increase in abdominal fat. It's like, what does that mean? What is going on? Fructose is actually more obesogenic. It makes us fatter. So if you think about how we started drinking more high fructose corn syrup, drinks, colas, things from corn syrup, sugar beet, sugar cane, those are all sugars that are higher in fructose. They're sweeter, they're cheaper to make, you get more yield. And so, big pharma loves that. And but humans have, their bodies have not caught up, and we have limited transporters for fructose, and so it doesn't get to go into the bloodstream. Body shields the blood from it and sends it right to liver. So then the sugar goes to liver and it gets stored there a lot of times. If liver can't find a way to store it as glycogen energy, then it actually fattens up the liver. So that's
Which
where
is
you get.
not great. And we'll go into a little bit with just about how sugar is going to impact mood. Yeah.
Yes. So sugar is pretty addictive. You crave it. It's just as addictive, they say, as cocaine. You get a big dopamine release from it, and it makes you want more. However, when you just have a sugar meal, remember we said it's kind of toxic. It's toxic to brain cells, and it forms sticky, dysfunctional proteins that are harmful to neurons. And so that makes sense that if you reduce it, then you're going to protect your neurons and hormones and balance your mood better, um, and reduce that inflammation. But the way that cycle works, why you get inflammation is because it is toxic. And so your body's hormone, insulin's job is to take sugar out of the bloodstream because it's toxic and dysfunctional. So it shunts it to other cells. That's what insulin's job does, is to open the cell and let sugar go in. And that's fine until the cells say, we have had too much sugar, we can't use any more energy. And then insulin's job is to turn and become a fat storage hormone. So then it packs on that abdominal fat from sugar. So a lot of people think that abdominal fat's from fat, but really it's from sugar because body doesn't know where else to put it. So we don't like to present a problem without presenting solutions. And there are ways to handle this. Avoid sugar, and particularly processed snacks that turn to sugar quickly, like the chips and the crackers and the granola bars. Anything in a package like that is so processed that it turns to sugar really quickly. So think about your snacks and let them be fruits and vegetables, nuts, and other complex carbs, instead of packaged snacks. So when you're making your lunch, go ahead and make your carrots and hummus as your afternoon snack. These foods, once they have fat in them and protein in them, even if they have some sugar and some carbs, they're just going to take longer to digest. So that's how that works. And
And
you
I,
will
I
avoid the sugar blues like that little lady has
that
on
little
her.
lady, I it wasn't long ago that I looked very much like her, and I've had I don't I've said for forever, I've been diagnosed hypoglycemia a very long time ago, and I knew that if I didn't eat pretty frequently, I was going to look like this lady, and if I even ate something that was high in sugar, I would get shaky and dizzy. It would feel like a panic attack. And actually, when I have folks come in and see me about panic attacks, I usually will ask them, what are they eating? How frequently are they eating? And more often than not, some of the panic attacks happen when there's low blood sugar, right? When they've either eaten something sugary or they haven't eaten for a very long time. But it does play a role in our mood here. But I also know how hard it is. I knew how hard it was for me to kick the sugared thing that I had. And so what we are talking about here, I just want y'all to know that we are not suggesting like this is super easy to do and you should be making better choices, like we aren't being judgy or anything about this. What we're trying to do is just to inform you that there is a way to maybe increase your mental wellness and your overall well-being, but we also really know that it is hard to do. Increasing the diversity means changing of our microbiome, helping heal our microbiome, helping it thrive. It takes some changes. Now we get some questions about supplements, like how about probiotics or vitamins? Will that do the trick? It can help, but it's not going to be able to do really all the good work, because what Angela was saying before, when you get into the cycle of when you have leaky gut, you have to repair, and it's very hard to stay ahead of that repair if we're continuing adding some inflammatory food. So I will always think that, changing food choices and exercising, deep breathing and meditation, spending time in nature are very key. And when you put that together with the right supplement protocol for you, the right vitamins and or probiotics for you, you can do some really great healing and really feel good. It's hard to figure this out on your own. It's even hard for us to even figure out people who are complex, even with the training that we have. But we want to, so I created the Flourish in 40 program because I knew firsthand how hard it was. And I also know that if folks are struggling with mental health symptoms, it can be even more challenging for them. Maybe that they're overwhelmed a lot and are having a really hard time going, I don't even know where to start. So this program, we do it either in a group class or on one-to-one. It's 42 days of new healthy habits, of self-care, food choices, mindfulness, cooking, prepping, food shopping, all of these things. And we do it slowly over time instead of let's eliminate everything at the beginning, and kind of real regimented and kind of can be really challenging as well. So we try to do it slowly. We have a new group class starting on May 19th in a few weeks. We try to keep them small so you'll have a cohort. It's affordable at $195. We're also trying to give some discounts to mental health professionals as well. So hopefully that this might interest you to do this, but we also offer on a one-to-one program where we do individualized food changes and supplement protocols for you to jumpstart your healing. But here's some where Angela's going to go over it. There are some things that we're going to make suggestions that you can do on your own. It may be hard, but we're trying to make it simple. And again, no judgment here for what we're asking you to do. We're just saying, try to do your best with some of the suggestions we have for you.
So this is some kind of do-it-yourself stuff that you can start right now. You can substitute fast food and processed food for more whole foods that you find on the outside of the grocery store. Prepare your meals at home versus buying pre-made food, and then stick to real whole foods. These are fresh fruits and vegetables, organic when you can, hormone and antibiotic-free meat and poultry, wild-caught fish if you can find it, pasture-raised eggs, preferably non-GMO, because if they are pasture-raised, they're going to have omega-3s in them already. So it's the pasture-raised meat. They will have more healthy omega-3 fats. Legumes and nuts and seeds, if those are well tolerated. Sometimes they're not for people, so just listen to your body. So we talked about the fats not to eat, such as the industrial oils, but the healthy fats that we invite you to cook with at home are olive oil, coconut oil, grass-fed ghee, that is butter that's had the dairy removed, and then probiotic foods such as sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, things that are, some of those our grandmothers used to use, and they're really coming back in favor because they're so beneficial.
And I just want to add here, Angela, you said a few times, and it's such an important piece about omega-3 fats. Omega-3 fats are really important. You can see here we're looking at fats in the nuts and seeds and the fish and the eggs and the healthy fats down here, because our brain, and a lot of our brain is made up of fat. And so for really good brain functioning, fat and really good omega-3 fats is really important. So just want to make that little note here. And the probiotic foods of the sauerkraut, the kimchi, and the kefir, they end up, it's kind of like, Angela, I know we talk about, having really healthy ingredients in your soil. Here you are, if you're doing a lot of planting right now in spring, you're putting compost in, you're putting maybe some fish emulsion and some other, maybe some, I want to say, moisture. And I'm losing it right now. I'd like to help some things to help retain moisture in the soil.
Oh,
So
mulch.
well, mulch, I'm thinking, it begins with a H, and I'm having a senior
Okay.
moment.
Okay.
But what we're going here is that something like sauerkraut and kimchi and kefir can be like these little ingredients that you're planting in the soil, so that all the other food that you're adding in there really can thrive. All the nutrients that you're also putting in there. So you're really trying to make your microbiome this really healthy environment for when you add diverse foods, that it is going to be like a synergistic effect with it. But there's a little downside, isn't there, Angela, at the beginning?
Oh, there
For some.
is. I
For
mean,
some.
we just ask everybody to prepare for a few withdrawal symptoms. It's hard giving up these things that you've become accustomed to: sugar, alcohol, the fats that you're used to having. So you might have a withdrawal symptom, meaning you might be irritable, you might have a headache, you might get anxious or have body aches. Try to tolerate these for a few days, just knowing that you are doing good stuff for your body, because it's a sign that your body really did need to get rid of these things and that you're a little bit addicted. Um, and then, be easy with yourself and just remove one or two things at first. You don't have to remove all of this at once. Just remove one and listen to your body. How does your tummy feel? And hopefully, we always say that the good feelings will be louder than the feelings of deprivation,
Yeah.
right? Because we're going to
And
miss this stuff. But
and also, just so you know, we are not saying you have to do this for the rest of your life. So we're saying, to do it for at least a month, maybe even a few months, to see how you go. So right, just want to add that in.
And it would not be a talk about reducing inflammation without talking about elimination. Okay, we've been talking about foods to maybe take away or foods to add, but really removing waste, I have to say, if you are plugged up, it is more important to eliminate well at this point, even more so than what you put in your body, because those toxic and toxins and chemicals need to be eliminated from the colon to prevent being reabsorbed by the body. Okay, let that sit for a second. Your emunctories are all the organs that take toxins out of your body, such as kidneys, lymphatic, liver, and skin. They carry waste out. If they can't carry it out, and particularly in colon, if it's sitting there because you're constipated and can't go, water's being reabsorbed because it's precious. Bile's being reabsorbed because it's precious. And then all the lead that you might have been trying to let go of, or beauty products, chemicals from your skin, anything your body wanted to poop out. If it didn't get to poop, it gets reabsorbed. So that's just a little graphic, too graphic probably, but it's just to say how important elimination is. And that we should poop at least once daily. But big news, guys, experts consider 1 day constipation. I'm sorry. It's really better and more ideal to move your bowels 2 to 3 times a day. So let's give it lots of vegetables, fermented foods, fiber. We're going to talk more about fiber, probiotics, things to keep things moving, and lots of wonderful, clean, filtered water, and magnesium if you need a little assistance is always a good thing. So fiber, why is it so important? What's the big case for fiber? Biggest thing, fiber is food for the microbiome. If it's not getting good complex vegetable fiber, it is starving. And I don't think that people realize that when they look at their plate, over 50% of it should be vegetable fiber for microbiome. Like, what is microbiome getting out of this meal? The proteins, the fats, and your carbohydrates, a lot of them get absorbed in the small intestine before they even get to the microbiome. So you can see that if you have a diet lacking in adequate fiber, and particularly complex vegetable fiber, you're literally starving microbiome. Average Americans are 50% deficient in fiber. And when they get it, sadly, it's the fiber that's on the side of a box. It's like on the side of their cereal box or their crackers. They're like, I'm getting 2 grams of fiber from my crackers. Not really. It's the kind of fiber that's not complex, not rich, not stringy. Um, this diagram down at the bottom is, it's, we're not going to spend a lot of time parsing the difference between soluble and insoluble. I'm just going to tell you, microbiome loves insoluble fiber. That means the most of our body can't digest it. Only the microbiome down in the colon can digest it. And I'm talking about the skins on broccoli stems, the stems in your chard and your kale, the pod from your snow pea, the celery, the strings from your celery. All that is what microbiome thrives upon. So our fast food meals are so low in fiber, and even our meals that don't have enough fiber on the plate, even cooked at home, can really be deficient. So let's think about some more fiber.
Fiber, yes. Well, let's just do a really good summary here of some takeaways. The first thing I'm going to start off with is mindful awareness of what you are eating and not eating. Mindfulness can be helpful here. And the key is to do this without judgment. It's okay if you're not eating a lot of fiber. Hopefully, you know that we're not passing judgment here, but what we're trying to do is to help you maybe have some awareness here, like, oh, I'm feeling a little more constipated. Maybe if I try to add some more fibrous vegetables, some insoluble fiber, maybe Angela can help me with some choices, or I can do some Google searching on some recipes that might be able to help me. And you might see that you're maybe feeling better when you're changing things up. And of course, the big piece here is some self-compassion, knowing that you are only doing the best that you can. If you're working an awful lot, if money is tight and it's hard to do the kind of things we're asking, we totally understand. Um, but also that mindful awareness and some self-compassion can also help you digest your food really well. So we can enhance digestion with mindfulness, and we can be aware of elimination by the first thing that we can do is to breathe fully and deeply before and after meals. I talked about being in sympathetic nervous system or in dorsal vagal in the middle or the bottom of the ladder. It turns digestion off. Well, really deep breathing, especially long exhales, can signal to the brain that you're safe. If you've got plenty of time to exhale, then there may not be a threat around you. And so it may be able to turn digestion on and put you in a more relaxed state, in that rest and digest state. And of course, if you chew your food really, really thoroughly and eat without distractions, so that you're mindfully aware, I'm really chewing an awful lot right now, you're then helping your body to digest and break down the food and to get the really good nutrients out of there. We're asking you to be mindful of your elimination. Like, are you eliminating every day? I know that I ask that of clients, especially when I do intakes, and a lot, quite normal to hear, oh gosh, I don't really pay attention to that. And when we start paying attention to that, we can kind of track how our mood is going or how our sleep is going as well. So this mindfulness of how our body is sleeping, eliminating how we have energy or pain, can really help us to understand what foods are working for us and maybe what foods are not. And of course, drinking a ton of water, super important, filtered water. We're asking you to try eliminating maybe even one category of inflammatory food, at least for a few days, just for a few days, to see how you feel. Pick one: sugar, gluten, dairy, alcohol. or all of the above. Sometimes you might feel so good, like that's what happened to me. I felt so good. I had so much pain in so many joints and all areas of my body, and when I went grain free, which by the way, when you get rid of some grains, all of a sudden sugar disappears because the grains are like the vehicle for sugar. I felt incredible. And all of a sudden, I just kind of, it's like I feel like what the good feels outweigh that. I do miss a croissant every now and then. I do have one, or a slice of pizza, but I feel so good that I don't miss it that much. And then also, what we're saying is making your best effort to prepare most of your food at home, because you know what the ingredients are, you know where you source them, you know what they are. I know that it's hard to do, but we're even saying just even try, even if it's just adding more veggies to your plate. That's even just a really great start. I've got some resources here. So these are some of our favorite resources. We love Dr. Daniel Amen and Dr. David Perlmutter. They have written a bunch of books. Two of these are really good. There's The Autoimmune Fix, that's also very good. Dr. Mark Hyman has a whole bunch of cookbooks and a whole bunch of recipes on his website. I love food. What the heck should I eat? I think his new one is now the Pegan diet. So he's a really good resource. So we love Jill Grunwald's book on the Thyroid Essential Cookbook as well. And of course, our website, Flourish in Austin. Flourish in Austin has got some good recipes there. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Know that we've got this class coming up that you're welcome to join us. If you ever wanted to have a free consultation with Angela to see if working with her on nutrition, she's happy to do 15-minute phone consultations. I do some consultations. I used integrative nutritional and psychotherapy with what I do. We have a new therapist joining us soon who's also both integrative and doing psychotherapy at the same time. So we've got lots of stuff happening with Flourish in Austin for you to get on your best road to wellness through the food mood connection. So I'm looking here. I see. I don't have questions here, but that's okay. Nice to see you all, and hopefully we'll get to see you again the next time we do something like this. Take care.